Hi, thanks for joining me on the Everything and Anything and a Bit Gay podcast. Today I have Tracy, the sleep coach, all the way from the United Kingdom, joining me on my show. Welcome to the show, Tracy.
Thank you very much for having me.
So in my first season, I did an episode where I talked about my sleep issue journey, and it started more than 30 years ago, probably. My father also did not sleep well. And I got so many comments back about talking about the different things that I did, from going to therapy to doing a ketamine infusion with a doctor over a 2-week period, and multiple types of sleeping pills and NyQuil and everything. Is I'm sure you've heard all this before. So I was so happy whenever I discovered you that you have a whole, this is your business, is to go in and to help people with their sleep. So tell me about what you do.
Right. Well, I work on Zoom specifically with adults who have insomnia. So I'm an insomnia specific sleep specialist. There are over 85 different sleep disorders, but that's the one that I work with. It keeps me plenty busy, let me tell you. And if in my screening, I think somebody has something other than insomnia, I send them on their way to somebody who's more appropriate. But work via Zoom. And evaluate people's sleep, the sleep itself, as well as their views on sleep, their judgments about their sleep, their satisfaction with their sleep, because these things don't always line up neatly. And a lot of the time, a lot of the aggravation that people have about their sleep actually makes their sleep worse over time. So the harder they try to fix their sleep, the worse their sleep becomes. And so unwinding that as a response to sleeplessness is a big part of what I do.
You are, I mean, just what you said just makes so much sense. I mean, I have laid there and thought, I'm going to go to sleep now, and just talking to myself in my head about, okay, no more thinking and trying to turn it off. And I have not been successful. Um, and insomnia, is that probably the largest population of people that have sleep issues? Is that what they end up getting diagnosed with, or is there other things?
It's a pretty large chunk of the population. At any one time, you're looking at a fairly decent percentage of people in the UK and in the US as well, who have in what might fit an insomnia disorder kind of diagnosis. I don't really like it as a label myself. Too many people carry around the words, I am an insomniac, and I think we need to delete that kind of thinking from people's brains. It's really not helpful. But there is a very large population of people, and this is also increasing, who have conditions like obstructive sleep apnea, which really needs to be treated because of the health consequences that are associated with it. And to a lesser extent, restless leg syndrome and a handful of other sleep disorders are pretty prevalent, but and not diagnosed in a lot of people.
So why is it growing? Is it because of the stresses of the world, or we're just all can't disconnect? Like, what's your thinking about why there's so much sleep disorder in this world?
I think those things are quite tightly linked, actually. I think particularly since the pandemic and people were starting to work from home, structures that helped us organize our life and therefore organize our energy and our attention kind of went out the window.
Yeah.
You can appear on Zoom half dressed and nobody knows.
Exactly.
And more importantly, at the end of the workday, you're not closing an office door, leaving a building, having a commute, which provides a natural contextual cue change that says work energy is over here and home energy is over here. And nowadays, particularly since a lot of people haven't gone back to work, companies have said, well, let's have everybody work from home. The demand and the compression on people's private time has led to a lot of sleep procrastination and carrying that stress into every waking moment that we have. So that definitely does not help. I think in terms of the connectedness with social media and with employers, that certainly plays a part, particularly if you're following events in the world that happen to be emotionally provocative for you. Pick one. There's lots.
There's lots going on right now, especially.
Yeah. Lots to choose from. It's hard to look away, isn't it? But that definitely plays a part. And just the fact that we carry around in our pocket a phone that usually has apps on it that can now track everything.
Hmm.
There's actually a condition called orthosomnia where people become obsessive about tracking their sleep to the
Okay,
point that
so I just bought
it
this
harms
Aura
their
ring.
sleep.
I just bought this Aura ring, which tracks my sleep, my heart rate, all this stuff, and it is like, I'm glad I got it, because it helps me kind of keep up with like exercise and those type of things.
Mhm.
But it tells me down to the like REM sleep, how much I got, how restful I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen.
I have, yeah. One of the issues with all of these devices, and they are getting better, but none of them are particularly accurate when it comes to sleep staging because they are using proxies for sleep. And the reality is, we're never going to sleep with EEGs on our head to
Yes.
actually get,
Yeah.
so the proxies are getting better over time. But if you take inaccurate information, even if it's accurate, just to say they're all 100% accurate, people don't know how to interpret the information.
Yeah.
I've had people come to me saying, I only get 20% deep sleep at night. And that's normal for a human being, 20%. We
Okay.
spend most of our night in light sleep. And so it just provides a place for people to anchor their anxiety about what they think sleep should look like for them. And it's not often based in what's realistic for a
Hmm.
person's age or for what's going on in their life. I think tracking all of this information feeds a perfectionism that if we just know enough data, we can fix our problem with our sleep. And the analogy I always use, anybody who's ever listened to me before knows I love this analogy, that sleep is like love. And the more you try to force it to look a certain way, the bigger it's going to blow up in your face.
And how much sleep do you think a person should get though every night? Like what's it, or is it depend on the person?
It depends on the person, which is why you have averages that are like a range. So some people can do very well on much less sleep than another person needs. And how do we define very well? They have the energy and mental capacity to do what they need to do,
Yeah.
physically and mentally and emotionally during the day. Whatever that number is for a person usually looks like taking 20 minutes or so to fall asleep, but not less than 5 minutes, because then we start thinking about pathological sleepiness and other sleep
Um,
disorders. Um, it's normal to wake up a couple of times in the night, long enough to remember it. We actually wake up many more times than that. It's
okay.
actually it's a part of our alert system that's built into our sleep. So we come up into light sleep, scan for safety, looking for lions. We
Oh,
go back to
interesting.
sleep.
That's
But
so
it's normal
interesting.
to wake up enough to be aware of it and to take a little bit of time to fall back to sleep. Um,
Okay.
the
Yeah. I
length
mean,
of
that makes so
time it
much
takes to
sense.
fall to sleep is longer as you get older too. So it gets sleep tends to get a little bit more choppy. And then when a person wakes up, some people take a little bit longer to kind of get going in the morning. That's also okay. But whatever that number looks like is the number for that person. And for some people, it might be 6.5 hours. Some people it might be 8 hours. For me, it tends to be about 9 hours. If you take a typical healthy sleeper and put them in a sleep lab, 7.75 hours, it seems to be a good number for a broad group of people. That's how they come up with the range. The sleep foundation is between 7 and 9 hours. The problem is people start to panic about not getting the magic 8 number, which is in the
Hmm.
middle.
Yeah.
And that myth that people need 8 hours, every person needs 8 hours, generates a lot more sleeplessness than the recommendation helps.
And what do you think about the sleep labs? Like I've had a friend that's gone to, he's done it twice where he's gone and stayed the night at a sleep lab and they, monitored his sleeping and he didn't really feel like he got a lot out of it, to be honest.
Mhm.
And, I guess he was hoping like they're going to say, oh, this is your solution and you're going to go home and do this and you're going to be fine. And you're going to take this or whatever. And
Yeah.
they gave him some analysis, but it was really nothing that helped him.
Yeah. Sleep lab is what you want if you are looking for the other sleep disorders. So,
Mm,
restless leg syndrome, or
mm,
REM behavior disorder, or obstructive sleep apnea, or periodic limb movement disorder. A lot of these other things will show up in those sorts of sleep studies. Insomnia doesn't show up in those sleep studies. I actually view it very differently than people are starting to think of it more as an anxiety issue that manifests with difficulty. It's like a fear of not sleeping, which of
Yeah,
course then means it's difficult to sleep. And that doesn't show up in a sleep study because it's not manifesting itself biologically in the same way, in the way that gets picked up in a sleep lab. So they're
understood.
absolutely essential for picking up the conditions that need medical management. But if you don't have one of those, even if you do repeat sleep studies, if you have insomnia, it's not like it's going to say, yes, this
Yeah.
is insomnia,
Hmm.
because insomnia is diagnosed clinically rather than with a sleep study.
I see. And so, what is CBT and ACTI? Can you tell me what those phrases are? And is it part of, I know I read on your website the acceptance and commitment therapy for insomnia, but tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, and ACTI, acceptance and commitment therapy for insomnia, are the I encapsulate those as sleep therapy. Particularly CBTI has over 30 years of evidence behind it.
Hmm.
ACTI coming right up behind it, very excellent evidence supporting its use in longstanding insomnia. A lot of people have never heard of them because they go to a doctor and they get sleeping medications. And
Yes.
actually, if you look at the treatment algorithms that are recognized by all of the major medical associations in the world, all the major sleep associations in the world, if somebody has longstanding insomnia, um, medication is not the recommended first approach. It's CBTI and sleep therapy, essentially,
Hmm.
because that's what works. Um, it's intensive to deliver for people. If anybody's done therapy before, CBTI I find it a little bit of a misnomer because it's not the
Yeah.
same thing as cognitive behavioral therapy. Like you're just talking, there is some cognitive restructuring elements to it, but it also looks at the biopsychological relationship to the bed and some sleep structuring. People who might have looked it up, they often get scared when they read about it because it's
Okay.
very prescriptive. But
Hmm.
in actuality, if you're working one-to-one with a person, it is not as rules-based as it appears to be, at least not the way that I work. I don't think it sets people up for success to do that. It leads to the idea if we follow the rules hard enough, we can
Hmm.
control sleep. And that doesn't get rid of the fear of not sleeping at all.
Yeah, makes sense.
It covers it up. And that's where ACTI and acceptance and commitment therapy comes in. And specifically the mindfulness elements, being able to step back emotionally from the situation and practicing skills for doing that. And the other element of ACT that is really important is despite how a person feels, might feel tired, um, the message is don't give up the things that you love and that you love to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, people get very focused on the sleep piece,
Yeah.
especially if they have health anxiety, because they're reading all this stuff about health consequences and all that. And so they focus on it to the exclusion of other things when issues that often bother people is brain health, for example.
Hmm.
The two other most important things for brain health, aside from sleep, tend to be the two things that people give up when they're not sleeping well. So if we have three things and we can only control two of them, we need to we need to stay in the game. And those two things are social interaction and physical activity, especially if that physical activity is dynamic and it's in response to other activities, like something choreographed, a team sport where you're playing with
Yeah.
somebody. Very powerfully protective.
Okay, that's great.
So, yeah.
And there's a lot of myths I think that are out there about sleep and why you can't go to sleep. So, my husband will say, put your iPhone away 2 hours before in the blue light. Maybe that's true. Or turn off your TV before, an hour before you go to sleep. Yet he sleeps with the TV on the entire night
Hmm.
and it's noise in the background for him.
Hmm.
I have to have a fan going because I have to have this white noise. And now in the last 6 months or so, I have these earplugs that I put in to kind of like really take myself out of out of the world in a way, and the earplugs have helped. But like, what's some of the myths that are out there that you could kind of tell us about that are just not true?
Mm. So a big category of, well, myths, maybe. A big category is a lot of the sleep hygiene stuff that you'll read about online. For example, you have to have a dark room, or you have to have a cold room, and you can't eat 4 hours before bed, or you can't
Okay.
look at screens for 3 hours before. A lot of this has to do with preventing stimulation from affecting our sleep from the outside. So if you live on the ground floor and there's cars going by and lights coming in, and that disturbs sleep, having your blinds down is a great idea.
Yeah.
But if you're then taking your blinds and you're taping them to the window to keep every photon of light out there, the light is not what's keeping that person awake. It's the fear of the wakefulness that's keeping that person awake
I
and trying
see.
to keep out all of this. So all of the sleep hygiene things, they are neutral. They are not necessarily necessary. So this idea that people have to have certain things, people will often feel like they have to have certain things in
Hmm.
place. I encourage people to take an empowering language standpoint with these things and say, I am choosing to do this. I am
Yes.
choosing to do that. Other big myths, aside from the 8-hour myth, I think kind of touching on the screen element,
Yeah.
it's much more important to monitor the content of what you're kind of consuming online, through your
Oh,
phone, for example, or through the television, than it is with to be overly concerned about the light, for example.
that
Um,
is, it just makes so much sense. It seems so obvious now that you say that. Like, if you're reading something that's disturbing you about what's happening in the world, you're probably going to think about that, right? Or if you're
yeah,
looking at an email
me
from
too.
work.
I don't have a particular magic button because I have this experience in this great big toolbox. If
Yeah.
I read something disturbing before bed, or if I accidentally get a glimpse of something disturbing in
Yeah.
a movie that I wasn't expecting, I might have difficulties. And
Yeah. It's so
it's
obvious if you
almost
think about it.
normal to have a difficulty if you're that disturbed. We are not meant to be sleeping if our arousal system is switched on. It's actually proof that the system's working exactly how it should if we are stressed out and we're having difficulty with our sleep. People tend to think, oh, I'm broken. That's another big myth. I've lost my ability to sleep.
Uh huh.
People don't lose their ability to sleep, but they can become a little bit separated from it. And the curtain between them and a better sleep experience, especially if it's been going on for a while,
Hmm.
is sleep anxiety. It's an anxiety or desperation for sleep that the brain interprets as a threat. I'm not going to sleep. Okay. The brain says, okay, well, there's a tiger in the room. Of course, we're not going to sleep.
Yeah.
So I guess the idea that if you make these simple changes, that you're guaranteed to get good sleep is a huge myth, because most of these things are dealing with the outside rather
Mhm.
than the inside. Um, and I don't want to demonize sleep hygiene. I don't want to demonize screens or tell people they have to look at screens all night.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, it intent is really important when it comes to choosing how you spend your time, whether it's the middle of the day or whether it's in those couple of hours before bedtime.
What do you
uh,
think about naps?
Naps, ooh, so I'm in my 50s. I have the privilege of working from home. I love to take a nap, and I occasionally will schedule one in, but I don't have sleeping difficulties.
Okay.
If people have difficulties sleeping, taking a nap can make things worse.
Mm.
Another kind of, then tying into another myth as well. If you're not sleeping well and you're really tired, you should go to bed early, or
Oh, yeah.
you should sleep in. That's called time in bed extension, and it often creates a more broken sleep and lighter sleep over time for people. So it can actually exacerbate the problem.
Yeah. I mean, I have started doing that in the last year. If I'm tired, and even if it's 8:30, I'll start to lay down and go to sleep. Now, I'm not
Hmm.
making myself stay up to what I used to try to stay up to 11 o'clock every night. And so I'm just trying. I'm like, okay, my body's tired. I'm going to sleep. It was a crazy day. So,
Yeah, and occasionally that'll happen. I'm an early bird, and it's been really warm here, and there's no air conditioning in the UK,
yes.
and so it's been really hot. So sleep has been more challenging for everybody.
Mhm.
And I will confess, the night I went to bed at 7:30 at night, and I
Yeah.
fell asleep and I slept until the morning because the previous 2 nights were difficult.
Yeah.
But I wasn't doing that to catch more sleep. I wasn't doing it out of fear, and I
Mhm.
don't do it all the time. If people are going to bed early to try to catch more sleep, it's and they have sleeping difficulties already, more kind of background all the time sleeping difficulties, it's going to make their sleep worse over time. We
Yeah.
want to actually do the counterintuitive thing usually, which is to stay up until you really can't fall asleep. You're just falling asleep. That's when you want to go to bed. You don't want to go to bed because the clock tells you I'm going to get 8 hours if I go to bed at this time. And you don't want to go to bed out of fear and trying to catch a little bit of extra, because that only reinforces to our
Mm.
body that we're in danger if we don't get enough sleep. And it can fuel that cycle in the long term.
So I have a whole routine every night of getting ready for bed
Mhm.
um, and not just washing my face and brushing my teeth and putting on all that stuff, doing all that. But it's like I lay down, I take a melatonin, I take a sleeping pill. Sometimes I take a low dose Xanax on top of that, and after I take that, I'm probably within 45 minutes I'm asleep.
Mhm.
I would love to get off of all that medication. So is booking time with you something that you could kind of help guide me so I wouldn't have to take this medication eventually anymore?
Yeah, absolutely. So CBTI is successful throughout a broad kind of range of people's experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a lot of people will start sleep therapy on medication with the idea of eventually tapering off their medication. People even who don't have an intention of doing that often develop enough confidence in their ability to sleep that at some point they go, well, why am I taking this when things are so much better?
Yeah.
Um, it's a it's it's a little bit more of a combined process when it's tapering off sleep medication. And I can't advise specifically on how someone should taper, but what I can do is I can help that person have that conversation with their physician for the biological safety side, particularly with things that might be habituating. But what I help with is the psychological side. If I said, Zach, I want you to take all your stuff and just chuck it out the window, you would probably panic,
I
which
would.
would guarantee that you wouldn't sleep very well.
Yes.
So there's a building people's confidence in their skill set first is important, and ramping up sleep drive, improving sleep as much as possible. So getting you to the point where you'd be falling asleep in 15 minutes and having more solid sleep, and then working on that as a longer term goal. It's
Well,
really common to have a situation like that.
my therapist that gives me my sleep medication actually has suggested I find somebody that does CBT. So, and
Mhm.
every time I meet with him once a quarter, and this is what he says to me every time, like, find this person. Insurance doesn't cover it. It's okay, but it's going to be worth it for you. So, I mean, I feel like we were meant to
Here I
meet
am.
each other. Yes, exactly. So, um, why can some people like fall asleep instantly and fall asleep anywhere? So, like, my husband can do that. He could fall asleep on a pile of rocks and fall asleep in 5 minutes and sleep the entire night. And I am just the person that, again, we talked about me, but, and also we're not sleeping in the same bedroom anymore because
Mhm.
we have such different sleep habits. He sleeps with the TV on all night and needs that constant line. I need it dark and earplugs in and nobody moving around. And I sleep on one side of the bed and the other side
Mhm.
is never touched. And
Mhm.
he's got the sheets and blankets and everything else laying in the floor by the end of the night because he's like a tornado.
It always
So
works out that way, doesn't it? You get a
it
good
does.
sleeper and a not good sleeper, or an early bird and a night owl.
Yeah. And a lot of my friends have actually, a majority of my friends now are not sleeping with their spouses or their partners anymore. So
Mhm.
they've moved into a separate bedroom. And I felt like this is something that, my grandparents did. But now it's like, when I was going into an office, this is a majority of people are not sleeping with their spouses anymore. Do you see that as being more common with your patients?
I would say it's not a lot of people. I think one of the things that happens is that people begin to judge themselves as not being able to sleep with their partner and that they've somehow failed if they can't do that. I try to discourage people from feeling that way if at
Yeah,
all possible, because it doesn't help anything.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It doesn't help anything. One thing I do help people with in a dynamic like that is if they have already if they're thinking about going that route, we talk about the pluses and the minuses in the event that that person wants to go back and sleep kind of in the family bed.
Hmm.
The same issue arises if people are having difficulty sleeping in bed, but they go out to the sofa where there's absolutely no pressure at all and they fall asleep on the sofa. If they
Hmm.
begin to use the sofa as their sleeping place, but they want to sleep back in their bed, now they
Hmm.
have two issues. One is to overcome the struggle association with the bed. At the same time, they say no to the sleep they so badly want on the sofa. So if the people have separated with the intention of coming back to sleeping together, it's a different dynamic, but I certainly don't judge it. Some people are light sleepers, some people are not. As long as they don't let the fact that they are sleeping separately affect their relationship,
Yeah,
and lots of people navigate that absolutely fine.
yeah,
I say do whatever makes you happy.
yeah.
Yeah.
And what is it like not getting enough sleep or getting good sleep? What does it do to your body like over time? Like, is there like what's the is it what's the physical ramification or what is it doing to your mind or whatever? So why do we need to sleep well other than just your
Yeah.
day?
Yeah, this is still a massive research question.
Okay.
Every day we learn more, and then we realize that we don't know nearly enough.
Yes.
But a lot of people are going to be very interested in that question because they hear about all the bad things that happen if we don't sleep well. So I want to address that from a couple different perspectives. One is when you hear these sound bites about prioritizing sleep, like you must get 8 hours or XYZ, or you have to get good sleep or XYZ is going to happen. It's really important to know where that information comes from. And a lot of times it comes from more population type studies. So poor sleep doesn't necessarily mean insomnia. Poor sleep could mean you're working 3 jobs and you're a single parent of 3 kids under the age of 4. Or it could be that you have sleep apnea. It could be that could mean anything. So it doesn't necessarily mean insomnia. And when we're talking about poor health outcomes in relationship to sleep, um, the sleep apnea is the strongest one. It's not just,
Mm.
I'm not sleeping well, I'm worried I'm going to have a heart attack. It's, you have to worry about that if you have obstructive sleep apnea and you're not treated or you choose to not be treated. I feel
Okay.
like that would be dangerous. We also tend to focus on the mental side of things and what we're not good at. So it becomes complicated decisions become more difficult because we become more emotional. In part, concentration can become a bit of a challenge for
Yeah.
us as well. We get drowsy more easily. So doing long, boring tasks, it takes that much more effort
Yeah.
to stay engaged, and the effort's hard to generate if you're tired. But what I will say is that we become good at some things when we don't sleep well. They just aren't always the most helpful things.
Yeah.
We can perseverate about things. That is a narrowing of our focus and our attention on something. Which in some circumstances could be helpful, but unfortunately we usually direct it toward fixing sleep, which
Yeah.
backfires a little bit. So it's not all bad news. And again, I want to just reiterate, a lot of people get very concerned these days about brain health, and I'm
Yeah.
probably going to do a massive like a master class type thing on exactly what happens and why it doesn't necessarily equate to a diagnosis of something in the future. It's too long to get into here, but just rest assured, if you've got 3 pillars, they're all important for brain health:
Okay.
sleep, social interaction, and physical activity, particularly if it's reactive physical activity where you're adapting.
Yeah.
There's only 2 of those things that we can control, and that is our social interaction and our physical activity. Even
Yes.
if we feel like we can't, staying engaged in those things is protective for us.
Wow. Okay, that's really good to know.
Yeah.
That's
Positive messaging is missing a lot in
yeah,
sleep.
yeah,
You know, and the public health messaging around sleep, I think, doesn't do anybody with sleeping difficulties any good. You make sure that you go to bed and you get enough time to. Well, people who procrastinate and don't sleep when they have the opportunity to, that's the messaging for them. Unfortunately, they aren't listening to it because it's not a priority to doing the task or getting up 4 hours early to work out, whatever
yeah,
is the task. The message that the person with insomnia gets is, oh my gosh, I really have to make sure that I get to sleep on time, and it just creates, if they could sleep in that time, they would be.
yeah,
So that it's overly negative messaging. So I always try to find that flip side. There are always things that we can do to improve how we feel in the moment,
yep,
to improve our sleep, to improve our outcomes, and to improve how we feel during the day. Because it's
yeah.
not all about what happens at night. um, you know,
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times when I lay down, I have these lists that start in my head, and I just, I'm like, I've now taken my iPhone and started writing down the list to see if that would help. Another weird thing is, it may not be so weird, but I'll get a song in my head and I'll
Mhm.
start singing it over and over and over, and not the whole song, but, and I'm singing it in my head, not out loud, but
Mhm.
and one
Oh,
of the
come
things,
on. Let it go. Let it go.
but one of the things I read is like, just finish the song in your head, like sing the whole song that you know, and then it should stop. That didn't work for me.
Yeah, it can be helpful for some people. A lot of here they call it an earworm.
Okay.
When you get the song going, it's often our brain trying to solve a problem.
Hmm.
And so it's going over and over and over and over it, trying to solve the problem. And with songs, it's sometimes not knowing what some of the lyrics are.
Yeah, sometimes I
Um,
don't know, though. I
so for
make them.
so for a lot of people, learning the lyrics, being able to sing it,
Mm,
that kind of eases that. Why our brain picks that, I have no idea. But it's happened to me as well. It's very irritating.
yeah. Well, this has been great. Any last minute advice just one tip you would give everyone that's listening to get better sleep?
It's really difficult to pick one. I would say if I had to pick one very achievable one,
Hmm.
that would be, if you're not sleeping well, stop obsessively tracking your sleep.
Mm,
And that includes looking at the time in the middle of the night when you wake up and counting the hours.
yeah,
The overarching one would be to work on dropping the struggle that you're engaged with around trying to force sleep to be a certain way, because that is the crux of long-term insomnia, is the fear of not sleeping that leads to that struggle.
that's great. So Tracy again is based in the UK, but you will work with people across the world. Is that correct? Because you're on
Absolutely.
Zoom.
New Zealand is a little tricky because of the
Yeah,
time differences. It's exactly the opposite, but I have clients everywhere from the west coast of North America, all the way across to Hong Kong and Singapore, and a few in Australia.
that's amazing. Well, I will be contacting you after this to schedule some time with you. But go to Tracy's website, tracythesleepcoach.co.uk. You can also follow her on YouTube and Instagram. Tracy the Sleep Coach is her username. Look her up. Her website's very interesting. There's some self things that you can do on there. Um, One last thing I wanted to ask you, there was something about group therapy. Is
Mm.
that something that you also do as part of
If
your?
I have enough people interested at the same time, I enjoy doing group work.
Yeah, I think that would be kind of interesting to do that too.
Yeah.
But I think I'm going to start with you with a one-on-one just to help myself first. So thank you so much. You've been an awesome guest. And again, it's tracythesleepcoach.co.uk, and go visit the website and get in contact with Tracy.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody. Be sure to subscribe to my podcast on your favorite podcast platform.